Hi everybody, and welcome to the 1960s. The 1960s are a very weird period for fashion. It's one of those that really didn't behave itself in transitioning neatly between decades. One of my professors used to say that the later part of the 1960s is the 1970s. So we've got kind of a clear delineation. First, we've got a continuation from the 1950s. It's kind of a natural progression, and then things get weird. So we're going to look at some of that weirdness today. First, Cassidy Jones has very kindly offered to model this dress, which was too tiny to fit on any of the forms in the fashion lab. And I wanted to show you guys this one as a good example of sort of this transitional kind of style between the 50s and 60s. I have suspicions that this was a bridesmaid's dress. We've got lace over an acetate underlay, and one thing you'll notice, it looks a little different from the 50s, although we still have that really fitted waist, very fitted through the hips, very fitted all over. You'll notice the sleeve is quite a bit longer. Kind of indicates to me, I think this one's probably 60s. Cindy, would you mind turning around for us? Thank you. We have a side metal zipper, which almost kind of indicates 50s, a little weird. Also, the skirt length maybe indicates a little more 50s. And we got this nice little slit here, which closes with a hook and eye. So now I want you to compare it to this next dress. Thank you so much, Cindy. This dress right here is another very transitional one. I would say this one is quite likely late 50s, possibly hemmed up in the 60s. And I'll show you why I think this. This dress is a very deep hem. It is, yes, it was hemmed up. So this dress is a very deep hem. It's about 4 inches. And if you flip it on the inside, you can see a line where it used to be hemmed before. It was 2 inches longer when it was originally made. This dress is either, I think this one is silk organza over what feels like some kind of synthetic, probably acetate. And I suspect it had a little more going on originally. We've got a couple of hooks here that indicate there was probably some kind of waistline interest. Things that kind of still look 50s. Something about the way this sleeve and this shoulder still kind of looks 50s. We've got this wiggle dress silhouette going on. We've got a good little bit of room in the bust, but the hemline has gone up. And I think that was to accommodate 60s styles. You'll also notice that the zipper has moved to the center back. We still have a metal zipper, and we'll still see metal zippers into the 60s and even a few in the 70s, but they're a little more of an anomaly by that point. But we've got the metal zipper, but it's now the center back instead of at the side as we would have seen in earlier periods. This next dress is another really good example of the early 60s. So we've got a fitted silhouette, but it's relaxed just a little bit, and we're kind of heading a little bit more towards that almost like a shift dress kind of a fit. This one's still pretty fitted. We've got a dart here with princess seams, but we've got just a little more room. And you'll also start to see the dress used as canvas a little bit more. This one boasts a delightful detail with what looks like a whole skein of embroidery floss that's couched on, and then we've got studded with little beads. If we turn it around, you can see we've got almost a little bit of a built-in cap sleeve just by extending the shoulder. And we have a center back zipper. This one is a nylon zipper. Nylon zippers were introduced in the 60s. That's the first time we see them. Some of the earlier ones include warnings about making sure you don't use too hot of an iron. They haven't perfected it yet at that point. This dress right here, a really good example, I think mid-60s. We've got a very structured skirt, a slubby kind of a fabric. It feels like it could be a linen, has a little bit of scratch to it. We have an acetate bow. We know it's acetate because we've got some fume fading going on. You see the bow has turned brown in some areas instead of green. This is a color fastness problem that you see sometimes with acetate. The bodice is a gorgeous multicolored floral print, and it's got sequins all over it. Really nice. This sort of columnar sort of shape. We've got a little bit of an empire waist here, sleeveless, a wide scooped neck. Very, very typical of 1960s evening gowns. If you look at the back, we have a nylon zipper, again, still with a hook at the waist, a hook at the top, and the sequins continue onto the back. A beautiful dress, really. Some of it just gets kind of weird. This is a fantastic 1960s dress. It's called a trapeze dress. It's very, very A-line. It has pockets that are lined with a really fun stripe that you don't see elsewhere on the dress. Kind of love it. We've got darts, a little bit of fitting. This hangs from the shoulders, very, very straight. Now this dress was not designed as a maternity dress. This is a very casual dress, trapeze. Oh, and we got polka dots going down the side. We've got a center back zipper. Now this was not made as a maternity dress. However, there are indications that during its use, this was owned by a lady in Franklin, Tennessee, the way it's hemmed indicates that it was probably modified for maternity at one point. And the reason we know this is you can see the fade line of the hem. She's left it longer in the front and shortened it on the sides and back, which is an accommodation that's often made for pregnancy because as your belly expands, it pulls the bottom of the skirt up. So, not a maternity dress, but used as one. Fun example of adaptive fashion. Moving right along in the 60s, things start to get more unfitted, not quite as unfitted as that trapeze dress, but definitely more into a sort of a shift dress shape. This is one I got at a thrift store in Athens, Georgia. This one was a gift from someone. And I put them together because I wanted you to see the sort of interesting geometric seaming that we see in kind of the latter part of the 1960s. You can see this great little zigzag effect, kind of reminiscent of what we saw in the late 20s and into the early 30s. We've got pockets. This is a boucle coat, is the type of yarn. It's got little loops all over it. We have huge buttons that have bound buttonholes. Very, very nice construction. Decorative double line of stitching along the collar to kind of mimic this decorative top stitching that runs along the side of the coat. We have very similar seaming and similar pockets on this little shift dress. We've got the bust dart is kind of moved into this princess seam, which radiates outward from the neckline, very different from what we would have seen earlier in the decade. Coming down into little pockets. One thing you'll notice about clothing of this period is that even clothing that was manufactured often has a very homemade look to the inside, sometimes without seam finishes. So if you look at this, you can see it's got just raw, unfinished seams here. It's got a facing along the neckline. I suspect the color maybe used to be more similar. It could have faded, or it might just never have matched. Who knows? But the construction of this looks a lot like a homemade garment, but you'll notice it's got a tag. This one is Westberry Fashions, a company about which I know nothing other than that they made this dress. The 1960s also included some very strange items. This is called a paper dress. This one was made by Hallmark. It's in its original packaging. I wish I could show it to you, but I'm not going to open it. And you can see total 60s. Look at her bouffant hairstyle right here. So this is a holiday paper party dress, size small. And this was made to be worn a couple of times and then discarded. As you might imagine, they're a little bit hard to find. I found this one on eBay for the sole purpose of showing to fashion history classes. This one, you can see it's a paper dress, and it's got a yarn tie, or trim as it describes it. They suggest tie in a bow to wear at the neckline, tie at the waist for a fashionable belt, or use it as an empire belt. Tie it a little higher on your waist. This one is a really fun formal dress from the period. It's had a little bit of a hard life. I think maybe mice got to it at some point, missing a chunk here. But anyway, this one is a synthetic dress. It's a synthetic chiffon, most likely polyester or maybe nylon. It's got this fantastic beaded trim on it in turquoise and silver. I love it. We've got this the unfitted look has reached new heights with this dress. And so we have this very loose fitted formal dress, sheer sleeves, sheer overlay, another sheer layer over this lining that was attacked. If we turn it around, we have a center back zipper, more mouse problems in the back. I don't remember where I got this dress, but a really interesting example of a more unusual formal dress from this period. Later in the period, we start to see precursors of the 70s, as in this dress. We've got a bit of a mini length skirt. Skirts kind of diverged. In the 50s, they were a little longer, mid-calf. They got up to right about the knee in the early part of the 60s. Skirts got shorter, and they kept going up. But at the same time, we got the maxi look with skirts going all the way to the floor. And I'm going to show you a couple of those in a second. This is a mini dress version of this. It feels like it could be wool. I think it is more likely synthetic. We've got a white collar and cuffs, very Wednesday Addams. It buttons down the front. There is a snap here under the collar holding it in place, and this has functional buttons. In the back, they've repeated the kind of geometric sort of thing with the buttons. I would put this very late 60s. And we've got the decorative buttons, just a little decorative back accent right here with the princess lines that are a precursor to what we'll see more of in the 1970s. The last thing I want to show you are these, my two friends, the granny dresses. Granny dresses appeared right around, it was in the very late 60s. I've got a couple of granny dress patterns that are dated at about 1968, one that's dated 1970. So we're looking at probably about 1968 to 1970 on these two friends here. These, I believe, were both bridesmaids dresses, both maxi length. This one is made of a synthetic crepe. It's got a really nice texture, this crepe weave. And we've got velvet ribbon in what is called, we call this beading, this kind of lace trim that you run ribbon through. We've got a center back zip, gathered skirt that comes up at the side seam, as you can see from its kind of more natural waist, comes up into a bit of an empire waist right here. And the trim almost forms a sort of a faux jacket effect, a little bit of a faux bolero. So this is fun. We've got this low neckline, again, really characteristic late 60s. This one is a true granny dress. Granny dresses were characterized by long sleeves, cuffs, lace, usually a floral print, typically buttons down the front, and most importantly, this standing collar like you see here. We've got a ribbon belt on this one too. This one feels like it's a polycotton blend. The flowers are flocked, which means that glue was applied in a design, fiber was applied to the glue, and you end up with these fun little fuzzy flowers. So the raised waistline is another major characteristic of the granny dress. This definitely pulls some elements from the early 20th century. It's got a bit of echoes of the Edwardian period with this standing collar, with the buttons, with the long puffed sleeves, with the lace. So definitely we're seeing some echoes of the Edwardian period, which are going to continue into the 1970s almost seamlessly. This dress has a metal zipper. Whoever made this did a very nice job matching up the stripes. So we've got a metal center back zipper. The collar fastens with hooks and eyes, much like collars of the Edwardian period would have done. And that is what I have to show you for the 60s.